In a second-hand set of dimensions, on an astral plane that was never meant to fly, through wavering star mists, see the Great Atuin. Drifting onwards through space, atop the shell of the world's turtle, are 4 giant elephants, upon whose broad shoulders rests the Discworld. Welcome to Dining Table Discworld. We're reading through the Discworld novels and discussing them at our dining table. Be aware there will be spoilers for the current book and others in the series.
Hello, welcome to Dining Table Discworld. I'm Dave.
I'm Kathy.
And today we are reading the 7th book in the Discworld series, which is Pyramids, which was published in 1989. And if you hadn't cottoned on already, these were all written by Sir Terry Pratchett. This also won the British Science Fiction Award for the year for Best Novel. I think we might have some things to say about whether it deserved Best Novel.
Maybe, I guess we'll see.
I'm now intrigued to go find out what was nominated that year. But anyway, while I do that, you read the synopsis.
I'll do the synopsis. Tepik is the crown prince of the Jelly Baby, a desert kingdom with a river valley and an overabundance of pyramids. As a child, he was sent to the Assassin's Guild in Ankh-Morpork for a modern education. On the same night he passes his final guild exam, his father dies, and Tepik, almost instantly, becomes king. Once on the throne, he finds his life and words are controlled by ritual and tradition in the person of Dios, the strict and very long-serving high priest. Tepik commands the biggest pyramid ever to be built for his father, although his father's ghost doesn't like the idea. The building of the pyramids creates many strange temporal effects, which causes problems for the pyramid builders. Tepik tries to save handmaiden Tracy from his own justice, and ends up escaping with her to neighbouring Thebe, just as the gods manifest and his kingdom disappears. Can Tepik get his kingdom back before gods, mummies, and pyramids destroy the 7,000-year-old nation? And does he even want to be there? Just to note, the episode will contain a mild swear word because it's a character's name. It's the word euphemistically referred to as bar steward, but we'll say it properly after this.
Okay.
So what were your initial thoughts, or are you still researching?
I'm still researching. No, I found it. Okay. I have not read any of the other nominees. Right, that's not very helpful.
It's from 1989. I mean, if anything else, that shows you the longevity of this. I guess Discworld stuff.
I've read... Anyway. Pyramids was one of the ones I'd say I'd read the most. So, as a child... Not quite a child. 9. I was 9 at the time.
That is a child.
Yeah,
the next thing, teenager.
Afterwards. But yeah, still, I enjoyed Fan of Ancient Egypt. So this one kind of tickled the ancient Egypt plus fantasy plus that's. But I hadn't read it for a long time, and I think coming back to it, it's lost quite a bit of its shine for me. It's not a bad novel.
It won an award.
It won an award, obviously, against Jeff Ryman, C.J. Karen. Beat Kim Stanley Robinson.
I mean, these are all authors I've heard of, and I've read some of their stuff, if not the stuff from 89.
So it's not a bad book. I don't think it's, well...
You just didn't like it so much?
No. Oh, well, we'll come back to some my expansive thoughts later.
Yeah. Did you feel it's been visited by the Suck Fairy?
I wouldn't say Suck Fairy, but, it's...
Just for people who might be familiar with that term, because it sounds a bit weird.
Later on, we're dealing with random fair folk being created by that'll be.
Yes. So the concept of the Suck Fairy is something I think I first heard on Twitter, and I can't remember the originator of it. But the idea that you enjoyed something quite a lot as a kid, or when you were quite young, and you come back to it as an adult or as somebody who's grown and matured and much time has passed, and you watch it, and largely it's that something's deeply problematic in there, and you're like, oh no. But I don't think it's just... I think that's one of the things that's been mentioned, but it's not just that. It's also like, maybe it looks really shoddy now, or maybe you're like, this isn't actually that funny. I probably laughed because I was a child, and children aren't always very discerning about humour. Well, actually, that's not true. They probably just have different humour. I think it can be quite discerning. I mean, there's nothing in here that's problematic for a modern audience. Some of the jokes you might... I mean, certainly Tracy hairdresser jokes a bit dated, but they're not problematic jokes.
So yeah, what was your initial thoughts? I'll let you have it.
So I only read it once, and I think it was reasonably early into me reading Discworld, and I think it was before I'd read either any Neil Gaiman or maybe I'd only read Neverwhere.
You might want to leave context for what I know Neil Gaiman.
Yeah, no, I'm getting to that.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead there for you.
Yeah. So the beginning stuck in my head, the idea of somebody who was the heir to this kind of like royal family that's also gods is living in what I guess would be like a more modern or more developed, more civilized, however you want to say it. Obviously some of that's a little problematic as a framing. Country who's then kind of pulled back by this family obligation. And I feel like that bit stuck in my head quite well. And then very little of the rest of it did, which is odd when you consider that since reading this, I have done an ancient history degree, but then another 15 years have passed, so that's quite vague now as well, if I'm honest. I thought, oh, maybe a load of stuff will chime for me. And I was there going, I mean, not massively, but it's been a while. And also, it was a while before that the book was written. Yeah. I read the book, and then a while before that the book was written. Yeah. So there's that. Although I did think that this book was one where the speed of monarchy idea came from. And obviously we've already mentioned in previous episodes it was in earlier books, but I think this is just where it's demonstrated, or that idea is picked up as a sort of like part of it. In terms of the Neil Gaiman thing, so I was recently reminded that Neil Gaiman actually, he's described it as co-plotted it with Terry Pratchett. There was a talk at the British Library between what was Neil Gaiman being interviewed by Ross Caveney, and obviously they're old friends, and it was for the Realms of Fantasy exhibition, which took place at the British Library earlier in the year, which we did visit, and there's some pictures of that on our BlueSky. So yeah, that was very interesting. But in one bit of it, Neil Gaiman mentions that, about talking to Terry Pratchett and the kind of friendship they had and sort of talking through ideas and things. And he did say he sort of thought about how he actually, was quite involved in, he called it the plotting of pyramids. And he also mentioned there was a thing some years ago, which I think I did hear at the time, where somebody had put Good Omens through some sort of software, which obviously trained on, Gaiman and Pratchett work, and it kind of identified which bits were more Gaiman and which bits were more Pratchett, and then Gaiman had been a bit like, oh yeah, that's about right, like, we worked on different bits, and then, obviously it was a collaboration, but certain bits were like more one than the other. And then the person said, also, there's quite a bit of your stuff showing up in pyramids, because obviously it trains it on Discworld and stuff, and he'd be like, so I actually was quite involved in that one compared to any other Discworld book. Although it sounds like they were bouncing ideas off each other, a fair bit as obviously collaborators on the book and also friends who are writers, which is quite cool to hear about. Yeah. Having heard that recently, I went and going, oh, well, this is one that like Neil Gaiman said he was a bit more involved in, and I've since read quite a bit of Neil Gaiman because I sort of discovered him by somebody mentioning he co-wrote with Terry Pratchett. I think I might have read Pyramids before I read Good Omens, which obviously, and I absolutely love Good Omens and have done for a very long time. So I sort of thought, oh, maybe I'll notice more of that. Because I know when I first read Good Omens, I noticed all the Pratchett-y bits, because I'd read, a chunk of Discworld at that point, but not much Gaiman. I think somebody recommended Neverwhere to me, which I might have read first, but that was the main thing. Yeah, I didn't quite see something that was like, oh, that's him so much, which I kind of almost half expected. But
it doesn't feel definite.
I feel like the computer figured it up. Yeah, the computer picked it up. I mean, that's fine. It's not like he co-wrote it anyway. No, I think he was just involved in something they were obviously talking through.
And some of the ideas, I suppose, are a bit more gaming-y.
There is some stuff stuff about like gods and religion, I guess.
Yeah, they seem a bit more Gaiman than Pratchett to some degree. Anyway,
I don't know that, but it's yes.
Okay, so we're both we seem a bit lukewarm on it, but I'd like to start at the beginning. So the bit that I actually enjoy, the bit I think I enjoy the most, because I think it's got the most relevant to the Discworld as a whole, is the first book. I say book, because this is actually separated into books. Because obviously the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead had various books, the Book of Going Forth and things. So it's splitting it up into various books. And I think the first book,
is it the Book of Going Forth?
It is the Book of Going. No, it's Pyramids. The Book of Going Forth is the title, and the first one is Book of Going Forth.
Yeah, because that's what we call the Book of the Dead, like in English. I think it's the Book of Going Forth is actually a more accurate translation.
And there we go. Is the Book of the Dead later? And,
Yeah.
Anyway. So the first section,
and then it ends with it gets very boy's own adventure, which
Yes.
again feels. See that bit I noticed because they kind of put that a bit in Good Omens as well.
Yeah.
So that I kind of noticed a bit.
But anyway, so the first book is Tepic in Ankh-Morpork, and he's going through his final exam for the Assassin's Guild. And this is where you find out. This is where you get a lot of information about the Assassin's Guild in Ankh-Morpork. And it's in Ankh-Morpork. We know the city. We heard of the Assassin's Guild in Weird Sisters through the eyes of the poor fool. So this is a chance to hear about the guild itself. And we get to see Tepic's final exam. Anyone who's done a UK driving test will recognise that Tepic's final exam is, of course, a UK driving test, except coached in more knives, caltrops, dead drops, potentially poisoned. Yeah. I mean, the one that gives it away.
Oh, the stopping distance one.
Yes, it is the stopping distance one. It's basically, he's asked, what is the maximum permitted length of a throwing knife? And his answer is maximum length of a throwing knife might be 10 finger widths or 12 in wet weather. Mm-hmm. And that's your classic stopping distance in the UK driving test. And then he's asked to make his way to a location.
Proceed to the location and
obeying all I want you to proceed at your own pace towards the street of bookkeepers, obeying all signs and so forth, which is I presume, because I actually haven't.
No,
well,
I was going to say.
You might. I think that is more possibly an 80s.
Yeah, I was going to say
driving test.
Yes, I was going to say because you've not done a car driving test.
I have done lots and lots of basic motorbike ones. That's not necessarily a good thing, but we'll just go beyond that.
Yeah, the driving test is a bit different because the guy's in the car with you.
Yeah, the bike one is a bit more interesting because you just have a headset and the instructor talks at you, but you can't talk back.
Oh, okay. I don't know how much you're supposed to talk back in the test anyway.
Well, quite often if you got it, certainly for my one, when it's a problem, I couldn't get the bike started. It would have been useful to be able to talk to them. Anyway,
I think it used to be proceed to this.
I think it was more.
It's that very standardised language, but. It's more that they just tell you where to go. You don't have to know where anything is. Although if you're doing well, you should have done a lot of practice around that test centre.
Which I found that bit quite amusing. And he goes across the rooftops. You get to see a bit of assassin-y stuff.
You get to see the rooftops of Ankh-Morpork.
Gets to be a bit more Ankh-Morpork. Again, we know Ankh-Morpork. This is a location we're gathering more information of as
different angle.
Yes.
Do you know what that's based on?
What?
Because they have a whole thing where they climb about a lot, don't they? The club.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it was 1920s thing, and I'm going to say Oxbridge, but there was a tradition of basically posh university lads. Mm. I think it was called the Steeplejack Club or Chimney Club or something, and they put chamber pots on top of chimneys just all over the town. I don't see. You're from Oxford. Have you heard about that? Was it Cambridge thing or both? I don't know. I feel like this section's got a lot of rich, overeducated gents were doing.
Yeah. And again, assassins are your rich, overeducated gents.
Well, I mean, this bit kind of ties into a grand tradition of foreign rulers sending their heirs to, let's face it, the UK and largely Oxford to be educated, and then they return to rule, and it's all a function of obviously colonialism and empire, and obviously the white supremacist idea of civilizing.
Not quite. It's not quite in the case of Tepic, because he's certainly not bringing civilization back.
Well, no, but I'm saying Pratchett is writing it in the background of that is a thing that exists. The number of when there were more countries that had monarchies, but that also had a strong relationship with the British Empire. A lot of them were educated here, and that's probably how you got much diversity in these places. Is rich people from abroad. And obviously even now, higher education is still a major UK export, much though the government aren't helping with that. But
Move along.
It's the export where people have to come over here, and that's the bit some folk are being rolled up against. But yes, that's a whole separate what's it.
So yes, I personally think this is the best. This bit is the best bit of the book.
Okay.
For me.
I feel like I just remember more the kind of the kingship coming upon him, and I didn't remember a lot of the stuff before that. More just the sense of culturally very different from where you came from, but you've lived here and acclimatized, or I guess potentially been indoctrinated to the ways of this place, and now you have to go back to where you were before, but you've been kind of raised entirely differently. And again, it's that very upper class thing of like sending your kids off to boarding school or off to the countries and, you know, them being separated from family and what... It doesn't go into the boarding school aspect as much because the point is it's the end of it. But obviously you saw the bad side of that with the Fools.
Yeah,
Guild stuff in Weird Sisters. Yeah. It's also interesting because obviously, and again, the big point is making connections. So he's mixing with other lads. And so there's this friend Chidder who's very wealthy due to his family's incredible smuggling empire.
It's commerce.
Commerce.
That doesn't work on an audio format.
I was doing air quotes. You can say it. I've heard podcasts where they do. But so Chidder's family is kind of like probably nouveau riche, but they're that wealthy that they can now send one of their sons off to make these connections. So they buy the education. But then it's interesting how that reflects later on stuff Tepic finds out about his own family, which we can go into later. It's just it's a sense of time with that. But yeah, so, and then in some respects, even, like, obviously, should have been nouveau riche, but even old established Ankh families are going to be flash in the pan compared to Tepic's 7,000-year-old unbroken lineage.
Yes. That section kind of finishes off with him suddenly finding that wheat is growing where he walks.
And the River Ankh, which was sluggish and slow and is suddenly flooded with an abundance of water and there's the thing with the seagulls, which I feel wasn't built up on as much as I thought it was going to be.
No.
His father likes the idea of the sea, hasn't seen it because they've got the delta, but that's the only coastal bit. The thing with the Jelly Baby is that it's very long and thin. It's basically just the river valley, which obviously, it's the Nile.
Yeah, it's exaggerated Nile.
It's the Djel.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm supposed to even be pronouncing the D, if I'm honest. There's a lot of letters we don't pronounce in this book.
This is a very language
more so the rest of English.
This is a very written language heavy joke. Book.
The country name means child of the Djel, and I feel like if you say it out loud, you see what the joke is. But maybe if you read it, you didn't get it right away.
No.
Do people generally know about jelly babies?
I would hope so. They are tasty.
That's true. One thing that I thought of. I don't feel like Pratchett is railing against anything here. He's just riffing on stuff. And is that what is missing?
That might be. Because
he's riffing on a lot of ancient stuff.
He's going to move into the, looking at the Jelly Baby and it's... I'm just going to call it Jelly Baby and just...
I was trying to pronounce the D.
I know, but we're just going to, I'll just go with Jelly Baby. And, it's the country. So it is this ancient, country with a grand history of pyramids.
It's called the Old Kingdom, which is a name of part of one period of Egyptian history, but they've got Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom, and
Jelly Baby just has...
Ptolemaic.
They have one form of Old Kingdom. That is it. It is the same.
It's also Kingdom of the Sun.
And they do...
Child of the Djel.
Yes.
The Djel.
They do a good line in pyramids.
Too many.
Too many pyramids. So this country lies between Sort and Ephebe.
Yes.
Which is Greece and...
I think it's Troy because of the wooden horse joke.
Yes.
But it's not any way otherwise Troy. The only thing they mentioned about Sort is that it's also a desert kingdom. Looking at the Discworld companion, it just mentions, they have some pyramids, but not as much as their neighbours, and they've gone out of fashion. So I think the Sort's just kind of there as the other side of the joke, and then they can do the wooden horse joke.
Yeah.
It's not Troy, because Troy wasn't a desert kingdom, and also there wasn't a kingdom in between Troy and Greece. It was just the isthmus, and
it's a bit of a joke.
It's another ancient joke.
It doesn't really get Ephebe gets later
because that's clearly Greece.
But Sort is kind of just there as to be the other power. That Jelly Baby is separating these two.
The point is, it's a buffer state, and it's been a buffer state for a really long time. So the only reason it has any power and it hasn't been taken over is because it's been between two other also ancient but not as ancient powers that are at war, and it's just the buffer state, so it just kind of plays them off against each other in order to continue existing.
And hopefully getting plenty of trade goods through and taxing them to pay for the pyramids.
Well, it's been bankrupt for...
Yes, it's been bankrupt for thousands of years. It's a great tradition of pyramids and bankruptcy.
Yes, absolutely, because they're incredibly expensive.
So when we get to Jelly Baby, the Pratchett's take on, various things of Egyptian
what I'm thinking now is, do we want to talk about like the setting or the plot or a bit of both? I've got some like Egypt stuff I can say.
A bit of both.
I so rarely get to use anything from my ancient history degree, and I won't use a lot now, but you know,
it's something. I was just going to say, you know, he starts playing, so you get lots of things because you've got the old what they call them kings, not pharaohs, but you know.
No, they do say that with pharaoh.
Okay. Anyway,
they mostly say king, but pharaoh is mentioned.
Yeah. Who is being mummified while he watches as a ghost, which must be a slightly.
He does seem a bit uncomfortable with it. I think. Well, the thing is, so Tepic's father was. Tepic Simon, is that how we're saying it?
I think so.
Because he's Tepic Simon the 26th, and then Tepic is Tepic Simon the 27th. Well, I haven't rechecked those numbers, but it's Roman numerals, it's something of that nature. And his father seems to have been like a nice old chap who's lived in the system. I think he had to fight to get Tepic out to have a modern education.
Yeah. Yes.
Did I get it right?
Yes.
Good for me.
He's 1397th monarch of Jelly Baby.
Yeah, there we go. So yeah, he I think he had a bit of struggle to get Tepic out to get him educated, and it kind of means that Tepic has this odd relationship with this guy he doesn't really know that well, and is also his father who was around, but is also a god that he is supposed to be worshipping up until Tepic himself then becomes king and also a god.
Yes.
But doesn't, other than one brief flash, doesn't seem to have much in the way of powers, just is him. And of course he's so out of step with where he was grown up because he's been educated and raised somewhere different, so he's asking questions, and it's incredibly stuffy in numerous ways and very rigid and tradition bound, and there's this idea that it's not changed in 7,000 years, which I would normally object to as a conceit in a book, except this actually is part of the plot.
Yes, it literally is the same day.
But not in a Groundhog Day way.
No.
Just that the time is constantly being recycled.
Which is an odd concept, but have you met the Discworld?
There was pyramid theory for a while, which is the idea that if you put things in a pyramid, they'd be preserved, and just that the shape did something. So there was that whole thing, I think it's a little bit like New Agey, where you'd put like razor blades in a pyramid shape and it'd all stay sharp. You could put things in there and they'd be like preserved, so I guess you didn't need a fridge or something.
And I think it came from the early excavating of pyramids and finding the preserved bodies and going... Ooh.
That's mummification, they put a lot of stuff in.
But they didn't know that at that point. It was just like, well, they're in a pyramid, so obviously that's the answer.
Yes, I think what's happened is that, Pratchett is playing with that. It's a bit like, well, actually the pyramids do have a temporal effect, and then it's explained later on that it was understood how it worked initially, and then people lost how it worked, and they became bigger, and it became more and more of a problem, so that and this is one of the first things where time gets played around with before we get to the more time-focused stuff. Every day that is created is sucked in by the pyramids and recycled. So it's been the same day for 7,000 years, but time still happens. And again, the Discworld Companion describes it as a bit like Death's Domain. Yeah. Stuff still happens, events still pass, things grow, people live and die, everyone's life continues, but the time itself is the same time being cycled. So that's why it gets really stuffy. And it literally feels oppressive and dry and heavy because it's the same time. It's just been recycled. What that made me think of was something that Mark Ashiro, who's like an author and he does like Mark Reads, Mark Watches websites, which I was reading and listening to a while ago. I haven't so much recently, but there was a point where he said something about, because he's from the US, and he had something about coming to Europe and feeling like this great weight of history. And me, as somebody who lives in Europe and also has studied a lot of history, was a bit like, oh, okay. But it did also make me think about, like, when I've taken Americans to, like, say, Worcester Cathedral, and we go to the crypt, which is the oldest part, and you're sort of like, oh, these are, like, however many 100 years old, and they're all really impressed. And I'm a bit like, all right, fine, this is just in my hometown. That weight of history thing made me think, obviously people have different experiences with that. I guess it's like that, but in, like, a bad way. Or, like, because it's, like, stuff's so old, I guess, but if you come from somewhere where stuff's newer, that makes... I guess the comparison.
I suppose even if we were to go to, I suppose when
I've been to Rome, we've been to Athens.
Yes,
I haven't been to each. The thing with Egypt was ancient to the ancients. It was ancient to the Romans when they conquered it. It was ancient to like the Hellenistic Greeks when they conquered it.
Yeah.
So Egypt was very much one of these things like that thing's been there forever, which again I can get more into, but we'll continue talking about the book.
That was a detour off, but so
it's what I have.
Okay, it's fine. So we were talking about we get to see the mummification process.
Yes, because his ghost is watching it.
Yeah. We get the pyramid construction. So, a Tepik arrives and, basically it's why his father must have a pyramid when actually he wants a sea burial, but, that's not how things are done.
In a sort of weird power struggle with the very intrusive and controlling and domineering High Priest Eos, who we will get to.
Yeah, we will get to him.
Tepik originally is a bit like, I kind of feel like my father didn't want a pyramid, did he want a sea burial? Which means he must have mentioned it quite early, because Tepik only saw him as a kid. But somehow in the power struggle of how things are managed, Tepik ends up saying he will have a pyramid twice the size of the biggest one we've ever built.
Yes.
And it's a bit like, that's a bit bigger than we'd do. Okay. And then the giant pyramid is the problem. With
all the bells and whistles. And that entire section is very much a building salesman,
so you've got Taklusp.
Yeah.
Who's the pyramid builder, and his sons Taklusp 2A and Taklusp 2B, one of whom is very much the accountant financial brain, and the other one's very much the architecture building things, temporal dynamics, I'm going to call it.
Yes.
Brains.
So yes, we get so the pyramid is a huge thing, and we get to meet the handmaidens. We get to hear about the handmaidens.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Tepik isn't quite sure what to do with that.
No, that's fair enough. I think his father wasn't really...
Well, his father clearly had a better idea to an extent.
That's a fair point, yeah.
Because, again, Egyptian pharaohs, while sometimes there are queens, designated queens, there's also an element of, they had harem cultures, concubines, whatever you want to call it. So there would be that. And quite often the son who inherited from a pharaoh wouldn't necessarily be the son of the queen. It'd be the son of one of the lesser wives or somebody. And obviously it varies over time. Because although the whole point of this is you've got this very static, or purposely very static culture for 7,000 years, our ideas of Egypt are taken from lots of different points.
Yeah.
When Dios is talking about him getting married, one of the suggestions is his aunt, which he's obviously alarmed by. But the fact is that there probably was quite a bit of inbreeding and sister marriage in the Pharaonic Egyptian period, and there definitely was in the Ptolemaic Egyptian period. So one of the jokes in this, which is hard for us to convey because we're talking, is that a lot of characters whose names begin with T sound are actually spelt PT. And is this where the Pateri nickname came from? Because obviously, people call him as Pateri, and it's like...
Potentially, yes.
But the thing is, that's actually a Greek noise. That's not Pharaonic Egyptian, that's Greek, because after Alexander the Great conquered Egypt, and then he died young and his empire broke up, Egypt was ruled by his general Ptolemy and his descendants, and most of them were called Ptolemy, and a lot of them were called Cleopatra. And that's the other thing, people think of quintessential Egypt, Cleopatra, and obviously there's references to that, but actually she was Greek, and she was one of the first of the Ptolemaic rulers of Egypt to actually speak Egyptian. They just spoke Greek. The ruled over would speak Egyptian, and then the rulers would speak Greek, because they'd originally come from Greece. And so if you look at the name Cleopatra, that's not, it's not Ramesses, it's not Tutankhamun, it's not Hatshepsut, it's not Nefertiti, it's actually very Greek. It means something like joy of the father. But the fact is, the Ptolemies did a lot of sibling marriages. Cleopatra married two different of her brothers at different points. And again, there's a bit of a plotline here where it's sort of flirting with the idea although again, it gets a little bit Star Wars, a bit like, here's a girl. That's nice, we're going on an adventure together. It's like, it turns out we're related. We'll say no more about it. But again, it's more a problem for him than her, because she's been raised in that environment where it's fine to suggest the king marries his own aunt.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And to be fair, it was only his half-sister.
Yeah.
Doesn't make it any better,
I'm just saying that this is a historical thing.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. No, it does. And that's the thing, it is pulling from numerous historical, and whether it's accurate historical or popular historical, I think it's more popular history.
I think that's the thing. I sort of went into it wondering how much am I going to be about, like, that's a reference to this or that. But again, it's from a while ago. The main thing that sort of stuck out to me was the mastabas. because it mentions those. So those were the forerunners to pyramids. And I think they mentions in this as something that lower class, so not the pharaohs and the kings, but like the lower class people would have. And that's basically like an early sort of tomb that was more of an oblong shape and kind of was a forerunner of pyramids. The other thing is that obviously we also always associate ancient Egypt with pyramids, or even just Egypt generally, although I think unless you're living near them in the bit of Cairo that's right next to it, and it's never in pictures.
No.
It's right, Cairo's right there. It's right there.
It's so freaky when you see one of those pictures. If Google Earth it is so freaky how close that Cairo is to the Great Pyramid.
Yeah, they show us like a picture standing in Cairo towards the desert. But yeah, those, the Great Pyramids and the Sphinx and stuff around it. So Cleopatra was closer to the moon landing than she was to the construction of those pyramids. Yeah. But I think probably because people don't have a great sense of ancient time. No. A lot, like the film, the film 10,000 BC gets it. No, it's not that old. We didn't only just come up with agriculture then. We're not building pyramids. There's no centralized government.
We apologise while this host has the host has a mental breakdown while she remembers the film 10,000 BC, and all I'm going to say is saber-toothed tiger.
It wasn't. They're in North America. Also, there were mammoths in what appeared to be Egypt because there were what and where did they go? I don't understand. Anyway. And he expected that film to be educational. So don't make the film educational unless you're going to speak to anyone who understands what happened. Anyway, there are a variety of problems with that. But the point is, one of the things with Egypt is that they had the centralised government, and having the centralised government meant you could develop, like cities, and that meant you could develop big work projects, such as building pyramids. But it's not like there were pyramids built the whole time. Obviously, the point of this book is that every new king dies, there's another pyramid. There's 1,300 and something?
Yeah.
That didn't actually happen in Egypt. There were points in the Middle Kingdom where you got some quite crappy pyramids that didn't really last very well. I did a whole seminar one semester about one at a place called Cahoon, which is good from an archaeological point of view because you've got a workers' village there for the people who are building the pyramid. But the pyramid itself isn't great because it didn't survive, because at various points, depending on which dynasties were ruling, depended on how much people remembered how to do this, how good the technology was, so it wasn't always
how many
the same.
May have got dismantled for other projects because they didn't like that particular lot, so they...
Well, I mean, and then you have to change from pyramids, which were being robbed a lot, because it's like, here's a very large structure full of a lot of treasure, to putting them in the Valley of the Kings, where it's a bit like, we're going to hide our god monarchs' bodies away so that they're less raided.
Yes.
Until, much later. And then a lot of bad stuff befell them.
Yes.
Oh, no, not scientists.
Not a scientist, no, sorry, I meant not scientists.
Archaeologists. And people who are a bit like, you know what, we can grind up these dead kings and use them for all sorts of weird stuff. And it's like, oh, how strange Victorian times, but also how typical.
Yes. Anyway.
I'll probably try and stop having so many of these now.
It's all right.
They literally ground them up and used them as fertiliser, and then people claim they had magical properties and they would snort them, and you're like, this is not how you should treat the remains of the dead, and also it's very gross.
Yes. Anyway, so in Jelly Baby, moving to the fictional,
sure.
We also have so we mentioned the High Priest Eos, but there is also numerous other priests and gods.
Well, there's lots of gods who appear later. There's various priests, but they're very much ruled by Dios.
Yes, but we were just saying, but there are conflicting gods as well. There's numerous gods that push the sun across the sky, which again I think is another example of. I'm watching my wife attempting not to kind of just have another little.
I'm not going to go on about Ra and Amun, but there were different gods at different times, which is how polytheism over a long period of time tends to work.
But in Jelly Baby, they are all valid all at once.
I think the point is you have a lot of gods. You have gods for everything, which isn't... I mean, Rome was said to have had that.
That's not unusual.
But everything is incredibly ritualised. Everything is incredibly traditional. This is this day and we will do this. It is this hour of this day and we will do this. And that is what Tepic, who's been, a young man about town in Ankh-Morpork, being trained to be an assassin, which isn't just being murdery, it's also doing it in like a fancy way and being able to, I think, be in society. And suddenly he's there in this. And the other thing is, so he's the king and a god now, but he has to wear a gold mask and no one listens to him and he can't decide anything.
Yes.
It's this very controlled life, which I think might be a comment on monarchy, particularly very ceremonial monarchy in general, but we'll not get into that. And what happens is anytime he says something, so there's bits where he's like talking, he's supposed to be giving judgment to people, and he's a bit like, oh, I can make some judgments. And then he'll say, oh, I think it should be this. And then the priest will interpret his words, which were in the same language, and say, with all the ceremonial pomp and stuff, oh, the king decrees this. And Tepper will be like, that's not what I said. And the other's like, no, but what you clearly meant was this, because this is the reason why it's this.
This is what goes. Yes, so pomp ceremony, he wears a gold mask, the face of the sun, and during his official functions carries the flail of mercy, the obsidian reaping hook of justice, honeycomb of increase, the asp of wisdom, the sheaf of plenty, the gourd of water of the heavens, the three-pronged spear of the waters of the earth, the cabbage of vegetative increase, and the scapula of hygiene.
I don't think I got that joke when I was younger. So, yeah, everything's very...
Yes, there is every hour, there is the words.
There's the hours, and yeah. So, it's very constrained, and yeah, Dios is originally introduced as a man with a very strange bedroom, yes. And it's clear that he's clearly running things, but everything must be according to this very stiff, controlled, stultifying order. And it says a lot about how old Dios is. He's always mentioning how old he is, old he is. He was the high priest when his grandfather was. So one of the sort of, I guess, going back to some of the more plot stuff, is that there's Tracy, spelled with a P, Tracy. Because in the Greek, they just say Ptu. She was a handmaiden. She was a favoured handmaiden of his father, but not in that way. It's basically that she's his half-sister, which his father's ghost mentions quite early on, but obviously Tepic can't hear him. And basically he sort of took an interest in her, so he kind of was being very paternal to her and would like get her to do stuff in a sort of proud, fatherly way, which is nice, because the point is that she says, like, oh, her family's always been handmaidens. Yeah. So obviously, which again goes to the whole inbreedy systematic thing. If you've got a family of women who are always serving as, that kind of role for the king, then it's like, yeah, everyone's quite related, aren't they? Yeah. But yeah, so Tracy is close to the king, who she didn't know was her father, and then he dies, and she protests about the pyramid. She said he doesn't want this. He never wanted this. He said this. And so Dios is like, well, she'll be thrown to the crocodiles, the sacred crocodiles. And Tepic's like, no, I don't want to do that. But as ever, Dios countermands him. So Tepic uses his assassin's training to break into his own dungeons and free her, and then possibly free some other people. And then people will be like, oh, the king will be after you. And he's like, but I am the king. And then when he's caught, then Tepic says to Dios, look, just tell them who I am. And Dios is like, you are against the king's justice. So Tepic's basically, he's saving her from his own justice. Yes. And he ends up having to run to the neighbouring kingdom of Thebe because he has to get out. Because, of course, the problem is, because the king always wears this big mask, no one can see who he is. Because he's just a figurehead. He's supposed to be there, and he's not fulfilling his role, according to what Dios says. Dios just needs someone to sit there to do the preferably what needs to be of the blood, so it's one of the gods. But it's just like I do. I think the point with this is that gods are fine if they are doing what they are told and not trying to get involved in things. Oh, the other thing I want to say before I guess Tepic leaves the kingdom is that Pratchett is kind of lampooning the royal family, and he does this thing where he wanders up to people and goes, "I'm very good, and what is it that you do?" And asks some questions. But then he makes a mistake of shaking someone by the hand, which is a golden handshake, because the gentleman he shakes by the hand has touched the god, so now his hand must be cut off. And in fact, the guy was trying to kill himself, and his friends stop him, so he just cuts off his hands. Then Tepic's like, "Oh no, that's terrible." It's like, yeah, stop shaking people by the hand then. Yeah. Because he just doesn't understand that that's not what you do in his own culture. But then he insists that the guy is given work and a pension, not pension, but he's given payment and paid work, and so somebody describes it as a golden handshake. Yes, and he becomes the king's barber. Yes, but one-handedly,
Yes.
which is also alarming. But this poor man who, because this is the thing, the sense you get of most of the general people of Jelly Baby is that they have short, tricky lives, but there's an order to things, and that's fine, and the reward is coming, because that's, obviously what the hereafter is a big, massive Egyptian thing. And I think the main other sort of regular people we see is we see the ghost of Tepik Simon seeing his own embalmers, which seems to be a master and his apprentice. We see the model maker guy, and we also see the pyramid builders, so Tapclusp and his two sons.
Yeah.
Tepik escapes with Tracy. They go to Thebe. Yeah, just to leave Jelly Baby, the kingdom disappears, and it's not there anymore.
Because they've failed to let the great pyramid. So when building, so this is where we get a bit timey-wimey. While building the greatest pyramid, I think is the close. They start finding time gets a bit wibbly-wobbly, and there are bits that start looping within itself and aging quickly, which is unusual for this. Normally shouldn't happen until the pyramid's complete, but it's happening when the pyramid's still in construction.
Well, it's almost like the pyramid's building itself, because so they do this thing where the blocks fly, and it's like, oh, this is a new thing. They can get the blocks to fly somehow. And
no, I think that's anyway.
Yeah, that's anyway. But I get the impression it's something that Tapclusp 2B has come up with, like temporal stuff.
Yes.
Whereas, because I think Tapclusp said when he started out it was still like rollers and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's not because that's just.
I know that's regular. I was just saying it, and again, it feels like it's poking fun at the sort of like, oh, who built the pyramids? Was it aliens? Which is that whole like, frankly, rather racist thing of a bit like, oh, see this great monument in part of the world the ancients did. Well, people back then, and also in this part of the world, are probably a bit stupid, so I'm sure aliens did it. It's like, no, people can do stuff, and if you're willing to throw literally thousands of people and man-hours at
amazing what you can get done.
You can build a lot of stuff, yeah.
So they start finding loops, and so they kind of like start copying people. So you get people...
Doppelgangs, they call it.
You get people you get them to loop through, so that you'll get one person who's doing a ridiculous amount of work
because there's 10 of them
just one day, or just because so you get some timey-wimey stuff starting to happen, and then they fail to,
they don't cap it in time,
and it's stored so much time it twists reality 90 degrees.
It twists the dimensions, because they actually say about timing the fourth dimension, so it twists it. So the kingdom basically disappears. You can only see it for a tiny crack. And so then these two, a Theban sort, are something next to each other. And Tepik's like, oh, well, he's just escaped his kingdom and now it's lost. And it's like, oh, that's a bit weird.
Yeah.
As Tepik and Tracy are escaping, they go to the palace stables and they steal the greatest mathematician in the world, you bastard.
Yes. He was a camel.
Because apparently camels are great at mathematics. And then there's a lot of mathsy stuff in there, which I frankly just skimmed past.
It's just a load of maths words.
And they kept referencing other camels that invented other things. I'm like, yes, camels maths. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's where I got to with it.
I mean, it's
know more maths.
Yeah, but it's just maths words. It doesn't really mean a lot.
Fine.
And it's just an ongoing joke in this that, the camel is super clever,
which I think is just based on them being able to spit really accurately.
I think also they spend a lot of time just sitting around chewing their lunch.
Chewing the cud.
So what else? What else are they going to do? Well, obviously sit there and think of complicated mathematics.
Okay, sure. I mean, there's one bit where it says somebody says something in what describes a camel whisper. It's like a horse whisper not being suitable for the desert.
Yes,
which was sort of funny. So you have sort of two things at that point. You have what's happening in Jelly Baby and what's happening in the Thebe. So in the Thebe, Tepik and Tracy hang around. They meet a lot of philosophers, because the Thebe, being ancient Greece, is full of philosophers who are shooting arrows at tortoises. It's because they're trying to prove you can't hit it. It's described as Zeno's paradox, but it's the thing where like an arrow can't hit a running man.
Yes.
And it's that whole thing where Achilles who's supposed to be really fast as well as the other stuff, can't catch up with a tortoise, because every step he takes closer to the tortoise, you can still divide the distance between in half, and it's where philosophy gets a bit mathematical, and it's not the bit I like so much, but I have done stuff about that.
It's where the tortoises are the fastest animals on the disc, logically.
Well, yeah, it's kind of the idea where Pratchett's taken a lot of philosophical concepts and sort of gone, what if people did that Discworld thing of being really logical about it? So you've got a bit of that, and then they all go and get drunk, and there's a lot of, like, eating seafood, which Tepic isn't familiar with, and also drinking Retsina. Tepic and Tracy both know Thebian. The Jellybabian gods are all animal-headed.
Yes.
But Thebian gods are human-looking, but turn into animals. Which is, you think about they're both weird in their own way, but there was a real world, syncretism between these things, but we'll not go into that. But there's a point where it says that Tepic, after hearing about Theban gods, suspiciously eyes the tortoise that Tracy is feeding in case it's a god in disguise, which I thought was interesting because of a later book in the series.
True, yes.
The link between tortoises and gods, sort of mentioned here. But there's a thing where Tracy is speaking of Thebian, but she speaks with an accent, so she says, "Oh, dear little tortoise." And then every T word she says has a put at the beginning. And he's like, "Oh, you've got a bit of an accent." And she says, "Oh, it's the handmaid training. You always have to have a little bit of an accent so you appear exotic." And this is the thing, Tracy is obviously well educated in certain ways, but largely in a sort of like handmaideny way. But she's also very practical. And then what happens is her and Tepic, after meeting various philosophers, including one called, it's not Pythagoras, but it's like that, who's very angry about pi because it doesn't make any damn sense. It's like, why are there so many numbers? What's happening? He's just really annoyed about it. There's also a very good bit with a guy who's a listener. His whole thing is being a professional listener. Yeah. They end up escaping with Tepic's friend Chida, whose family has what looks like a very fun pleasure boat, but actually is built incredibly for speed because of the smuggling and piracy.
Yes.
Or commerce.
It's also seems to be full of mattresses.
Oh, of course. Yes. No, that's it. Sorry. Yeah. So Tepic kept saying he wanted a proper bed and also plumbing. And so he kept ordering them. And then DLC would be like, "Oh, it's not come. So yeah, it's basically that DLC turned around all the mattress deliveries. So yes, I'd forgotten that bit. That detail.
And certainly at the end, and there's the port, there's a lot of plumbers and mattresses. Anyway. So yeah, I mean the bit where they're in a Thebe, is kind of.
It's sort of funny. I mean, again, if anything, I'm better with ancient Greek stuff than ancient Egyptian, but it's not into that very much. Then there's the joke that a lot of people in Thebe, the army, are running to the border because the border isn't with the Jelly Baby anymore. It's now with Tsort, and Tsort are doing the same thing. So there's kind of a joke. We've got two armies facing each other. There's the legend of the wooden horse. So then they all get into a whole big range of wooden animals. So they're all wooden animals facing each other.
Yeah, it's just
it's kind of a bit throwaway. What's more interesting, I think, is what's happening in Jelly Baby.
Yes.
So suddenly, the sky, which everyone in Jelly Baby knows is the body of a goddess.
Yeah.
Suddenly you can see her, you can see all the details, like there are stars in her like navel and stuff. It's like, oh, and suddenly all these animal-headed gods are striding around. And everyone who believed in it, absolutely, it was part of their culture, it's part of their belief system. They absolutely, this was what was coming. It's there. And they're like,
oh dear.
Yeah, what? And then the priests are there trying to control their gods, and the gods are just ignoring because they're big people just wandering around. And
you've got conflicting gods. So basically, the day happens with the sun basically being used as a football between all of these.
One of the priests literally does football commentary on various gods fighting over the sun.
Yes.
And there's one bit which is quite funny, which is something about them having the complete set of gods, and set is spelled with a capital S, which is a reference to an actual Egyptian god.
Yep.
Yes, so it's just this thing where suddenly all the stuff they believed but never saw is visible and there, and it's like, oh no.
And of course, all of the previous pharaohs who were interned and
mummified,
and to come back to life in the afterlife. Well, they're now alive.
Yes, I have heard somebody say before that, again, somewhere online, that the main difference between a zombie and a mummy is class.
No.
A mummy's just like an incredibly wealthy zombie who used to rule Egypt. But, so you have this thing where Tepic's father, he's been mummified, and so before he was outside his body and you can see what they were doing to his body, and now he's in his body, stuffed with, grain and stuff, with all of his organs and jars.
Yeah.
Oh, because he has to go and find his eyes, doesn't he? Because his eyes are in a jar, so he has to wander around and find his own eyes. And he gets out of his pyramid, and then he goes and helps the other mummies. And it's interesting because, like, he recognises his grandfather, and his grandfather recognises, like, his grandmother, and it goes back. And they're opening up all the tombs. And Dios is really angry about all this. And for a little bit, his kind of, I say deputy, but, like, the next highest high priest, who's called Kumi, which is short for Hoot Kumi, which is actually a reference to a real person, which I recognise largely because it's also mentioned in Tim Power's book as somebody's name. Yeah. But anyway, so Kumi, who was sort of schemy but couldn't get past Dios because Dios ran everything, is sort of trying to get to the top of the pile.
He's seeing it as a good time for a play for power. Doesn't quite go well for him.
No. There are crocodiles involved in that as well, aren't there?
There's crocodiles involved in a lot of this book.
Yeah. So some of the priests try doing things and a lot of people get afraid of the crocodiles. And you also have the pyramid builders, because what happened was the father tried to say, we'll have a big ceremony, because the point is the pyramid had all this time stuff in it so much, and they needed to flare it, because the whole point in Jelly Baby is the night is lit up by the pyramids flaring light into the sky. Like, that's what it is. I don't think it's ever really dark.
No.
Because as soon as the sun goes down, the pyramids flare, and that's them dispersing the time. Or something.
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 It's all quantum.
Sure, yes. And what the builder wants to do is he wants to have a big ceremony the next day. And his son's like, no, we have to cap it tonight. And the sons climb up, these twins, who don't get on and are very different. Like, one of them wants to do a lot of expensive building stuff. And the other one wants to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
They climb up the top, try to cap it. They can't. And what happens is that one of them is fine. The other one ends up being Flat Stanley. But in time.
I think another thing which we haven't mentioned, which is obviously another take... He's turned round, he's flat, which is obviously...
His dimensions have gone 90 degrees or something, so width is now...
I can't remember.
Anyway. Depth. He doesn't have depth anymore because there's time instead, so he doesn't move through time, he moves through... I know. He's basically like two-dimensional and
which is obviously
so they fold him.
Which is a play on the pictures, the ancient Egyptian, artwork, which is all...
I thought that was the ceremonial walking.
Yeah, I was going to get to that, yes. Yeah. That was the other thing. And the other thing is the ceremonial walking is basically...
Tefik has to relearn.
If you've ever seen the great Bangle song, Walk Like an Egyptian, that is it. Anyway.
The whole... Because of the art and, the Egyptian, the way they look on the tombs. Oh, yeah, I hadn't quite thought of him looking like a pictures. Yeah, I think I was distracted trying to figure out the 90-degree dimensions.
I think that's the idea. He looks now like a pitch. One of the, because obviously they were all they didn't do much in the way of depth on their pictures. Yeah. So there's the whole thing also the whole time with Dios going over the river. Like, Dios is going back over, and he keeps saying, he won't come back. He won't come back. It's been too much. It's like, no, but he needs to come back just to finish some stuff off. Just there's a bit more he needs to do. They can't manage without him yet, and he's been around a long time. No one can remember when. So all these mummies are coming up. Yeah, it gets a little bit confusing. There's just a lot of stuff, isn't there? And then what eventually happens is that Tepik has a bit of a spiritual connection with his ancestor, the first pharaoh. Tepik's shocked to discover that, this venerable ancestor, founder of their dynasty, was a camel thief. And I'm like, but what did he think royalty was? The upper classes, the ruling classes, they stole and steal to get and stay where they are. And this isn't actually that pointed out for a Pratchett book. And that's when I sort of thought, it doesn't feel like he's railing against anything, but it's there. Because Tepik's like, wait, we were camel thieves. But the point is the camels are the clue, because the camels can find the river valley because of the fancy math stuff. Yes.
So then Tepik takes the camel back.
He gets into the kingdom.
He gets into the kingdom.
So they have to get in, and basically, basically, they find out that they find Dios' pyramid.
So this is the thing, all the mummies, they can't understand each other. They find the oldest pyramid, they break in, there's no one in there, there's all this writing on the wall, there's a lot of marks on the wall, which is like, that was at the beginning of the book. Yeah. And what happens is, the newer mummies can't read it, so they form a chronological chain of everyone who can read it, because of course, even though it's been the same, things have still changed. Yeah. And the language has changed, so they're all kind of doing Chinese whispers back and forth to translate what was said. Which again is a little bit like, because you've got hieroglyphics, and then in the actual world you had Coptic, and you had Greek, and you had different languages follow on. So they have this chain of mummy. But what's basically revealed is that Dios has been going to bed in his pyramid, the oldest, smallest one, every night and recharging, because the original point to the pyramid is you put the dying but not yet dead ruler in, and the pyramid would just keep him going, but then they forgot what it was and they started doing it after they're dead and mummifying them. And the point is, Dios has been there for 7,000 years controlling everything.
Yes.
And that's why he can't change out of anything, because he's been one way for 7,000. And he keeps saying, oh, next time he goes across the river, he won't come back. He won't come back. And it's like a workaholic. It's something who's a bit like, oh no, well, I'll finish. Oh no, I won't do that. And yeah, he just can't let go, which is kind of like a bit terrifying and sort of sad.
Yeah. So they work this out, and they also realise that they have to flare, the Great Pyramid. So in the end, Tepik has to climb the Great Pyramid. Hence all the climbing stuff earlier on. Yes, which doesn't quite work until he gets basically a hand up by all the mummies, where they form basically a huge human pyramid. A huge pyramid of mummies. Yes. To lift him up. And he uses one of his... And he says he's kind of been held up by his ancestors, you know, it's this whole thing. And he manages to It weirdly made me think of some of the bits in Avatar where all the previous Avatars show up. It's like, but then, more bandagey, I guess. And then the kingdom returns. Yeah, once he flies the pyramid, And obviously they And then it gets a bit messy, but basically ends up that Tepik is like, I don't want this. Yeah. And because he's got like an uncle or somebody who trains as an assassin and went off. Yeah. So he does that, and he puts Trace in charge because it's revealed. Because he's kind of had like sort of thoughts and feelings about Trace this whole time, but is it just that she's a lady who's around, whose job is to dress attractively and wear like... And she knows bangles and all these, Yeah, she knows all this stuff and... So then Trace is in charge. Kumi's in charge. He gets to where he wants to be, but he suddenly has, for a start, all the pyramids explode. The Great Pyramid explodes, and all of the other ones. So it's no longer recycling time. There's now fresh time because suddenly there's sea air, isn't there? Yeah. And the seagulls come in again. And there was one bit where it said about the seagulls. Was it the birds said more with a simple bowel movement than Ozymandias ever managed to say, which is quite good. Like, because you've got all these ruins now because they exploded. Air is coming in, and it's almost like modernity coming in, blowing out the cobwebs a bit. And now you have someone on the throne who isn't quite steeped in all the... Because she hasn't grown up. I mean, she's steeped in it. She's grown up there, but she's grown up in like a very different position. It's also interesting because the point is she's ruling as... Because they make the point earlier on that one of Tepik's, was a great-grandmother or something, declared herself king and just declared she was a man, which is a reference to Hatshepsut, the pharaoh who was a woman, but was also pharaoh and king. Yeah, that's an actual thing from Egyptian history. Yeah. So, but Trace is there a bit like, no, I'm not a man, but I am the king. I am in charge, and Trace is not quite as hidebound by it, and also she's not been raised being like, well, you're family of gods, and you're going to be a god. Yeah. Which Tepik kind of had, and because I think Tepik always felt like he had to go back and do what he was supposed to, but it was just too stifling. Tracy gets Kumi's now got this. Basically, she goes, "No, I'm not doing that." And it kind of the idea of bringing aqueducts. So the pyramid builders are now going to aqueducts. They're the new thing. And all these feather mattresses and plumbers that had been misplaced between Angmorpork and Jelly Baby. Kumi's watched Dios, but he's not Dios. He's not literally 7,000 years old and always been in charge. The thing with Dios I quite like is that it turns out Dios is not only 7,000 years old, he's also cyclical. Yes. Because Dios goes back 7,000 years. I don't quite know how. I guess a pyramid explodes in time. And runs into what I assume is a load of camel thieves. Yes. So the point is he's been the high priest that entire time and has basically sculpted this entire 1,300 whatever strong dynasty in all these rituals. Because what happens is he wakes up, he doesn't remember everything, but he does remember what the rituals are because it's all burned into his brain because his brain has been 7,000 years of just the same thing. Yes, and that makes it... Because he's kind of the baddie, but you sort of feel a bit bad for him and a bit like, well, no, a human can't really go through that. That's why he's so odd like that. Yeah, that was pyramids. I feel like we got in more than we were going to, although part of it was admittedly my diversions on the topic. It's on topic. So I think for my final thoughts, it's a interesting read, especially if you know can draw the parallels to popular ancient history stuff. From a Discworld point of view, I think the insight into the Assassin's Guild is great because of what you see. We'll later on have various characters that go to the Assassin's Guild. I
think it isn't memorable because, unlike other stuff, it doesn't link into anything later. It's very much
standalone. I mean, you do get the introduction to a Phoebe, but you get more of that in Small Gods. It's not really...
I also don't remember as well as you'd think I would.
No. And really, there's nothing else. You never see any of the characters in it again.
And, it's fine, but he didn't really stand out to me particularly. It's like, it's like a young man doing some stuff and there's a girl around and she's doing stuff with him. Yeah. It's like, well, that's more. And also moving pictures. And, it feels like that's kind of a thing that exists. It just wasn't one that stood out to me so much. I think compared to the more ensemble stuff as well.
Yeah, and I think you're right in so much. It's telling a story, but it doesn't perhaps have the same not quite anger behind it, but it's sort of.
I don't know what Pratchett's angry about here. Yeah. I mean, it's more like the earliest of we're riffing on this idea, which is fine. Obviously,
it's an interesting idea,
but and it's good riffing.
Yes.
I'm not sure where the anger that we kind of enjoy so much, the this is an injustice and this is an inequality, it's not sort of there.
Yeah, and I suppose
so much.
And we are reading them in order.
Yeah,
and just, and just this one kind of feels like not quite a placeholder.
Well, no, I don't think it was at the time. It's just not something that he carried on with.
No,
particularly.
It's just
we could have seen Tracy later. We don't, because in Epic later, I don't believe we do.
No, we don't. I would say if you're starting Discworld, don't feel bad if you don't read Pyramids.
But if you're interested,
if you're interested in the assassin stuff, I think it's definitely got a nice introduction to the Assassin's Guild. Which
there's some reasonable jokes in there. I just don't think they're ones that carry over to other stuff because the characters don't really carry over.
No, it is nice and contained. Fell a bit flat for me.
I feel like other ones I think of as standalone can still kind of be put into the whole Industrial Revolution thing, and this isn't even that.
No,
it's just we've gone to Egypt for a bit.
But anyway, so I think general view is all right.
Yeah.
So thank you all for listening to our ramblings and diversions.
Yes, thank you very much.
Next is Guards. So thank you all very much for listening. We shall catch you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Dining Table Discworld. You can find us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Dining Table Discworld. You can also find us on BlueSky at dtdiscworld. All our other contact information and credits for our music can be found in our show notes. Thank you for listening again, and we'll see you in our next episode.